You're listening to Mike Chan Longevity, where we delve into the art and science of aging optimally. With Michael Chan as your host, embark on a journey to discover the secrets of a vibrant, ageless life.
Hi there, Mike Chan, CEO of Gaia Longevity. Today we're going to be talking about longevity medicine and why I, along with many others, believe that this is the medicine of the future. So what is longevity medicine? Longevity medicine is medicine that is designed to take you past average human lifespan. It is medicine that is designed to maximize our genetic potential for both health span and lifespan, with health span being the number of years where you are functional enough to enjoy a high quality of life, and your lifespan is the number of years you are actually alive on Earth. So today, the average human lifespan currently sits at around 80 years. And this is very good news because up until 1920, for 99.9% of human history, average human lifespan only sat between 35 to 40 years. So in a span of 5 generations, we have been able to double average human lifespan. And that's great news. But that's not the whole picture. Why? Because leading genetic scientists today tell us that the genetic potential for life for 90% of humans is between 100 to 120 years. Okay? So this means that for most of us, it's actually possible to live to 100 or even 120 years. So how do we know this is true? We know this is true because although it does not happen frequently, it does happen on a regular basis. People regularly reach 100 years and above, again, on a regular basis. And in fact, today, the second largest growing age group demographic population is the 100 and above age group demographic. They are second only to the 85 to 100 age group demographic. So our population is indeed aging. We are indeed living longer. In fact, scientists from Stanford University's Center on Longevity predict that in 25 years, the number of centenarians that we have right now is going to be 8 times higher than what it is today. And in 2050, by the time 2050 rolls, children born in that year and onwards will have an average life expectancy of over 100 years. So we know it's coming. But what good does that knowledge do for us today? Right? Many of us might not be around in 2050. How can this knowledge help us? So what's important to understand is that people who are living these long lives, these centenarians, they are actually reaching 100 or beyond mostly by accident. They're not really planning to live 100 or more. They just do. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, if these people can live so long by accident, can we, with the help of science and modern medicine, deliberately create a blueprint that will allow us to maximize our genetic potential? Can we create a plan to actually get us to a strong 100 years? And the answer to that question is an increasingly obvious yes. Okay? So, and this is where longevity medicine will come into fore. This is where longevity medicine will spearhead this transition. So why do we need longevity medicine? Isn't modern medicine already doing this for us? Isn't modern medicine already trying to extend our health span and our lifespans? And the quick answer is no, not really. And this is because of the way that modern medicine is actually practiced today. This is because of the way modern medicine has actually evolved. Modern medicine has evolved to delay death and not to prolong life. And these are two very different things. So I'm going to give you an example, right? So this is a typical mortality curve for the average 21st century human, okay? So in our past videos, we have defined aging as the gradual loss of function of our physical functions over time. So this is a typical aging curve for the modern average 21st century human. So in previous videos, we discussed aging as the gradual loss of function over time, right? So we as humans start off with maximal function, and over time, our physical functions deteriorate. And when enough function is lost over time, when enough of our critical systems reach zero function, that's essentially the end of the line for us. So that leads to death, right? So, in fact, the only difference between a young person and an old person is the amount of function that they have on their bodies. So a young person will have at or near 100% cardiac function, liver function, kidney function, whereas an old person will have impaired or less function. Okay, now this is an oversimplified explanation of aging because aging is actually very, very complicated. It involves many processes like cellular senescence, mitochondrial dysfunction, DNA dysregulation, etc., etc. But because nobody really understands why and how the aging process works, let's do away with the complicated explanation and stick to a simple explanation which most people will understand. And that is, again, the loss of function over time. Now, it's very critical for you to understand this because this graph will dramatically, if you can understand it, influence how you're going to age and how long you're going to live. So, as humans, okay, as humans, we typically reach our peak physical functions at around 30 years of age, right? So this is true for most mammals. Most mammals are designed to be optimized for only about 30% of their lives. So this is going to be true for our pet cats and pet dogs as well as for humans. You will see that cats and dogs live on average about 12 to 15 years. So you'll see the first 4 or 5 years, they're very active. Appetite is strong. They're always looking for sex. But when they hit their middle years, the second third of their life, the ages between 8 to 10, you can see that their reproductive function goes away. They are not as active. And by the time the third decile of their lives come into corner, by the time they are between the 10th and 15th year, they're basically just lying around the house. So the same is also true for humans. We are maximized at around 30 years, the first 30% of life. Now, why is that? Evolutionary biologists believe that this is in order for us to maximize our reproductive potential. This is in order for us to be able to pass on our genes. So for most of human history, for 99% of human history, the average birthing age of women is roughly around 15, 16 years, right? So by the time you are 15 or 16, you would be old enough to reproduce. And in another 15 or 16 years, your offspring will be old enough to have their own offsprings. So by the time 30 years rolls over, by the time you have your grandchild, you have effectively passed on your genes. And at that point forward, you're just competition for resources for the next generation. Nature does not need you anymore. And so nature slowly, gradually makes you weaker and removes you from the gene pool. Okay? So, again, this is to ensure that we propagate our species. So, again, for most humans, we are basically bulletproof up until the age of 30. And statistically speaking, 95% of all deaths will happen over the age of 40. Okay? So after 30, we begin a slow but steady decline in function, and this accelerates with each decade of life. Okay? So, now, the way modern medicine is practiced, the reason why I'm saying that modern medicine is not designed to extend life is because of the way modern medicine has evolved. So, think about this. The only time you would go to a hospital would be when you had a serious condition, right? Or a potentially serious condition. You won't go if you have a mild sprain, if you have slight coughs or colds. You would only go when you have a potentially serious situation. So, let me give you an example. So, you would go to the hospital if, for example, at the age of 65, right? Somewhere around here, you fall and break a hip. You break a hip or you break a hip femur. At this age, there's a very real danger, especially if you're frail, that if you fall and break something, that you're not going to leave the hospital alive. So there has to be intervention at this point. Or let's say you develop pneumonia at the age of 70, right? You develop pneumonia at that age. With pneumonia, there are a lot of possible complications that are potentially life-threatening. So you have to go to the hospital. Now, you go to the hospital, what they do is they treat the immediate concern. They treat the immediate threat to life. But once that threat has been resolved, right? Once they've healed the bones, once you've recovered, once they've removed the pneumonia, effectively, your contract with the hospital expires and then they send you off. They discharge you. So the end of your contract is the immediate resolution of whatever brought you there in the first place. Now, the problem with that is because you only intervene at this point, it does not change the actual trajectory of aging. So again, the point of intervention ends when the immediate threat to life is over. So this is a very effective strategy for delaying immediate death, but it's a very poor strategy for prolonging life. If your goal is to prolong function and by extension life, then the intervention must happen way before the diseases develop. And to extend life and function, you want to intervene as soon as function begins to decline. Now, for humans, we already noted that this is between the ages of 25 to 30 years. And here's why. If aging is the loss of function over time, and death is the ultimate manifestation of loss of function, so if one or more organs reach zero function, then that's the end of the line for you, then it stands to reason that you would want to preserve as much function as possible, right? You want to intervene at a point where function is still high. And by doing so, delay the loss of function. So in medicine, we call this compressing the morbidity curve. In longevity medicine, we call this compressing the aging trajectory. And we use AI algorithms, we use big data, we use machine learning and future medicine to do that. So we're going to be talking about that in succeeding videos. But again, how do we do this? We do this by intervening as early as possible. So it would help to think of the aging trajectory as like paragliding, right? So in paragliding, if you want to get the maximum distance, you have to take off from the highest point possible, okay? So this is why when you intervene somewhere at this point, which is where we normally intervene when it comes to trying to prolong health span, when something is already broken, when you already notice disease, that's the only time you become conscious of trying to fix whatever is wrong. And the problem there is, by the time you're here, then you have less runway in order to maximize your physical functions. What you want to do at this point is to raise it first. Now, I'm not saying that that's impossible. I'm just saying that if you start later, then it's an uphill battle. You have that much more work to do. That's why you want to intervene at the point where your functions are still maximally high. Now, a lot of longevity practitioners will say that you have to intervene at this point where physical development is at its prime. And I'd like to push back a bit by saying that actually for me, the point of intervention has to be much earlier, during childhood. Why? Because most people don't realize that a lot of children today, they never actually reach a physical prime. So, you often see children nowadays, you often see stout children, and they're going to grow up to be overweight adolescents and obese adults, right? So what happens is they never quite reach a physical prime, and so their lifespans are shortened. So I'll give you an example. If you're a child, or if your child develops diabetes before the age of 21, and that condition is not resolved throughout his life, the average life expectancy for that child drops to 65 years. Just by allowing that child to have diabetes early, you are actually removing around 15% of that child's life. So again, you want to intervene as early as possible. For parents, you have to be very, very conscious of this fact. So by allowing your child, simply by allowing your child to develop diabetes early in life, you're potentially cutting short 15 years of his or her life. Now, this is a prime example of how launching your paraglider from a low height can lead to you living a shorter lifespan and shortening your journey here on Earth. And this is the last point that I want to make. This is where theory meets real world data. This is where the rubber actually meets the road. When you look at the longest lived populations, the only real difference between them and the rest of us is that while they die from the same diseases that we do, they get them much later than the rest of us do. They still get heart disease. They just don't get it at 50 or 60. They still get cancer. They just don't get it at 70. And for the average human, right? For the average human, we get these diseases somewhere shortly after our physical prime. So between the ages of 35 and 40, we begin to develop hypertension. We begin to develop diabetes, right? We begin to develop central obesity. And the real secret then to living a long and healthy life is prevention, prevention, prevention. We will all get disease at some point in our lives, right? So again, for the average human, it is earlier rather than later. The longest lived individuals get the same diseases 20 or 30 years after we do. And those extra years, they are disease free. They often translate into longer and stronger lives. So doctors and hospitals are very good at secondary prevention, right? Secondary prevention is not prevention. You don't get to prevent heart disease once you've already had heart disease, right? The damage is already done. Prevention is done much earlier, at a much earlier point. And this is the central thesis of longevity medicine. Today, we have the tools and the scientific know-how to be able to do this with a very high degree of precision. Using AI algorithms, machine learning, data from these wearables that I'm wearing, right? We can now begin to track your pace of aging. We can track progression of disease. And in many, many cases, we can slow them down, stop them completely, or even totally reverse some of these conditions. In succeeding videos, we're going to show you how we how we do the interventions, and we're going to give you some of the tools that we use to delay aging and help you live better, longer lives. Until next time, this has been Mike Chan. To your looks and good health.
May I ask for a huge favor? If you're enjoying the show so far, could you kindly hit the like and subscribe button? We're very, very new on YouTube and we'd like to grow the channel as fast as possible so we can change as many lives as soon as possible.